Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me for another Alfred Hitchcock Presents review. Today, I will be talking about Season 4, Episode 27, The Waxwork, starring Barry Nelson and Everett Sloane. So, I was kind of looking forward to this episode, The Waxwork, because it looked like it was going to be an all-out horror-themed episode, which I usually enjoy. And I did enjoy this episode for the most part, although I have to say the ending was unsatisfactory to me and left me a little disappointed, but this is a solid episode up until that point, and I do recommend it for horror fans of, older 50s, 60s type horror stories. So the story starts in London, 1954. The episode's very specific about that. And our lead character, Houston, is visiting, and he wants to meet this man named Mr. Mariner, who runs this wax museum. And our reporter, Houston, we find out he's a reporter, is very interested in one specific thing, which is this Murderer's Row exhibit. It turns out that he wants to stay the night in this exhibit to get a story for his paper. Why he has to stay all night alone to do this, I'm not really sure, but you just got to kind of go with it. So he gets a brief demonstration from this mariner, who is reluctant to let this guy Houston stay there all night, but eventually he agrees. But before any of this happens, we get to see this new wax figure of a murderer that's coming in, this barber, who killed victims and was also known to hypnotize them. And this is a pretty creepy scene. There are some creepy scenes in this episode where we get to find out more about this barber, and it almost appears as if his eyes are moving at one point, which is kind of weird, but also relevant to the second half of the episode. So the first half of the episode is mostly set up, but I thought it was fine. So then we go to the next part of the episode, and this man, Houston, is basically staying by himself in this place. Now, he talks to Mariner when he finds out he's going to be locked in. He's very reluctant about this. He says he doesn't like to be in these kind of enclosed spaces, locked in by himself. But Mariner says if we don't lock you in, you can't stay. So Houston eventually reluctantly agrees. So things seem to be going okay. Houston starts writing his story until he starts getting really, really tense. He starts noticing it looks like the figures are moving around. There's some pretty clever camera work for early 60s TV in this point to give the illusion that Houston thinks that these figures are kind of moving around, maybe have a mind of their own, however you want to interpret it. So Houston gets up and walks around for a bit to try and calm himself down, I'm guessing, and things seem to be going okay as he's exploring some of the very creepy exhibits until a head rolls in front of him, or maybe it just appears that way, I'm not really sure. But it's kind of interesting either way. So he starts flipping out again because he's locked in and all that stuff. So eventually he does calm down a bit and he starts writing again. Seems to be doing okay until he starts writing about how it looks like the barber, the new figurine, is moving towards him. So eventually it comes to a point where the barber does literally come alive. And at this point I'm thinking this is probably all in his head, which turns out to be true, unfortunately. So the barber anyway explains how he's escaped and he's going to hypnotize Houston, which he does. Houston definitely looks like he's in a trance at this point. And I do have to admit that this scene, all in his head or not, is really rather creepy. The barber pulls out a razor and starts kind of telling Houston what he's going to do. And he surprisingly does. He kills Houston at this point, does him in, however you want to say it. So we go to the last scene of the episode, and this is where things kind of fall a little flat for me. Mariner comes in, and it turns out Nelson is a goner. His neck is in a position, like it was the night before. But it appears that he kind of did himself in with his imagination, because it turns out that this barber figure wasn't even in the museum yet. It was being brought in now. So it's kind of one of those, it was all in the guy's imagination, all in his head endings, which sometimes it works okay here. I just thought they could have come up with something a little bit more clever. The episode had a really good slow build, and then for it just all to be in his head didn't feel that great to me. But that doesn't take away the fact that this was a creepy episode most of the way through, and I really like the concept of it. So I'm going to give The Waxwork a 3 out of 5. I think this is an episode you don't have to watch. It's not essential, but it is a solid, entertaining episode, especially if you're a fan of these older type classic horror stories. I recommend it as a one-time watch. So 3 out of 5 for The Waxwork. Thanks for watching.